This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I am your host, Noah Taluki, and on today's episode, Super Bowl, Bucs winning at 31-9. I'll give you my thoughts on that game. Also, some Teddy Bruschi comments on Matthew Stafford. We'll get into that as well. Calvin Johnson, finally a Hall of Famer. I'll break that down and do a little recap of his Hall of Fame career, and also going to do a little Pistons talk. I know it's been a while, but we've been Lions heavy a lot the last couple months or so, but we're going to get into a little bit of the Detroit Pistons. Hopefully everybody had a great weekend out there. Hopefully everybody's staying warm wherever you're listening. You know, if you're listening down in the South or out West or whatever, you guys are already warm. So definitely a little bit of a different feeling out there, that's for sure, than here in the Midwest. But I stayed warm watching the Super Bowl. Bucs winning that one 31-9 over the Chiefs. And I'll just say, the game itself wasn't really a contest because the Bucs, they just handled Mahomes and company the entire night, and Mahomes was really under duress. I mean, you could see the Chiefs, missing those three starters on the offensive line. They really, really hurt. And that defensive game plan by Todd Bowles, who actually had an interview with the Lions for the head coaching job, but he had actually canceled his interview, and that was when the Lions were moving closer and closer to getting Dan Campbell. Todd Bowles with an excellent defensive game plan. And in my opinion, Devin White should have gotten the MVP. I mean, he had 14 tackles, a sack, and an interception at the end of the game to seal it. But there was no way they weren't giving it to Tom Brady. I mean, he's the leader of that team. And as much help as he had this season with a great defense, with a lot of talent at wide receiver, it's still his team. He's still the reason that they got there, I think. I mean, you give that Bucs team a solid quarterback, and they do things. They're going to be doing things really well. And that sure enough was the case this year. It seems like a lot of guys are coming back, too. Gronkowski, I think Antonio Brown, they said. Chris Godwin's a free agent, so we'll see what his future is. Mike Evans and all that. And I know, most Detroiters, they wish, obviously, the Lions were in the Super Bowl. They don't really care about these other teams that are in it. But just sort of my thoughts. And I will say this. I wasn't a fan of the halftime show or anything. And, I don't watch the Super Bowl because of the halftime show, obviously. I watched for the game. The game was my favorite part. I wasn't a fan of the commercials either. I think the one I kind of liked was the Wayne's World commercial and Bruce Springsteen, because I really enjoy Bruce Springsteen's music, and his halftime show was by far my favorite. That was one of the first ones I actually remember watching as a kid, and it still is to this day actually my favorite. So Bruce Springsteen getting some love, and his halftime show was actually in Tampa when he did it for Super Bowl 43 when the Steelers beat the Cardinals. So that was a nice commercial there. Also, Ndamukong Suh, former Detroit Lion, he gets a Super Bowl ring as well. So crazy now. All of a sudden, 10 years ago he was with the Lions, wrecking havoc on that defensive line. And now he is a Super Bowl champion with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He never should have left Detroit. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. But Suh never should have left the Lions. Because really, frankly, he hasn't really been the same player since. He hasn't been that intimidating, dominating, like defensive player of the year like type of guy in the NFL after he left the Lions. I mean, he's only made one Pro Bowl since he left, and I think that was 2016 with Miami. So I miss Suh. I wish the Lions had a defensive lineman that just wrecked havoc like him, because really, frankly, the defense has not been the same since Suh left. It hasn't. And Suh left that 2014. That's when he made first-team All-Pro, and they just have not really had a defensive lineman like him since. So very hard to replace, but hopefully this new era with Dan Campbell and company will get that fixed. All right, I want to talk about some comments that I heard from last week from Teddy Bruschi, the legendary New England Patriot linebacker. He won 3 Super Bowls with the team in the 2000s decade. And very, very legendary player, very respected still in the New England organization. He's on radio a lot and ESPN and whatnot. But he was on WEEI radio in Boston, which is like the big sports radio up there. And there was a question. They were talking about Matthew Stafford, because there were reports last week that Matthew Stafford said that trade me to any other team except New England. He didn't want to go to New England. And this is what Teddy said. He said, Stafford, referring to Stafford, he's not tough enough to play here. He's just not tough enough. I don't think he's tough enough to be coached hard. Do you realize the mental toughness that Tom Brady had to have for 20 years to deal with Bill Belichick and that type of coaching? I mean, constant pressure every single day. Does Stafford sort of grab you as a guy who could handle that? I just don't think so. He went to Sean McVay and his little best friend relationship and go have fun over there. That's fine. Come on. Really? Really? Who is going to question Matthew Stafford's toughness? I don't like that. To me, that's an arrogant thing to say. Look at our rings. We have certain guys that can play here and nobody else can. You can't say that, Teddy. Look, and I respect Teddy Bruschi. I have nothing wrong with the Patriots. I have nothing wrong with Bill Belichick. I'm one of those guys that just, I don't have anything wrong with him. I like Brady. I've liked Belichick. I mean, John Carroll, when I go to school, a lot of the people who work for the Patriots, like Nick Caserio, I know he just got hired by the Texans as their general manager, but Josh McDaniels, Ziegler, and a bunch of the other guys that are in the front office, I mean, they are John Carroll grads. I respect the Patriots. I do. But a comment like that, questioning Matthew Stafford's toughness, that he doesn't want to play in New England, I mean, come on. Now, look, I will say this. Matthew Stafford never really was challenged in his career for the Lions, because what I mean by that is the Lions never brought in another guy to take his spot. I mean, rookie year, who do you have to beat out? Drew Stanton, Dante Culpepper. I mean, those guys were. Stanton was a career backup in the NFL, and Dante Culpepper was pretty much washed up by the time he was in Detroit in 2009. Oh, what was his best competition? Shaun Hill. I mean, Stafford was never really challenged here in Detroit when it comes to a backup. And I mean, was he coached? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how well he was coached by some of these offensive gurus. I know that Scott Linehan was very influential early on in his career. I don't know if Sean Ryan, the quarterback coach for the last few years, I don't know what kind of coaching he did. But for Teddy Bruschi to say something like that, I think is just very arrogant. And it's just like some secret club, it almost sounds like. And remember, I respect the Patriots, but just a comment like that, it just makes it seem like, well, we're better than you, and you can't play here. Nobody can play here, and Stafford's not tough enough because he doesn't want to play here. Look, the other thing is that I don't think this whole thing with Stafford not wanting to play in New England has anything to do with Bill Belichick and not being mentally tough and all that. Teddy, do you know who was in the last regime with the Lions? Do you remember? Do you remember all the ineptitude that people from your organization, the Patriots, they caused on this franchise and the fan base? Do you know? Do you remember? Oh, that's right. Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn, head coach and general manager, two Patriot guys that did not do anything outside of Foxborough, Massachusetts, in those offices at Gillette Stadium. Nothing. They completely ruined the Lions franchise. And look, there's a reason why the defense is terrible right now. Now, do I think there's other pieces on the offense that are better than defense? Absolutely. That's why I think the offense, it's going to be a little bit more of a retooling, if you will. The defense is going to be a complete rebuild. Get all those Patriot guys out of there. But Teddy, nothing works outside of New England. It doesn't seem to work. I mean, there has been little success of people from New England going anywhere in the NFL. And that was obvious with Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn. I mean, that is like the definition of nothing working out from guys from New England, for completely ruining an organization. That was your guys, Teddy. That was from the Patriots. So I don't want to hear anything about Stafford not being tough enough. You see that. Fans, everybody sees how tough Matthew Stafford is. You don't think Matthew Stafford's going to be mentally challenged with McVay? I'm sure McVay is going to get on him. I'm sure McVay is going to coach him up really, really hard. I think that's going to happen because that's how McVay is. McVay's a great coach, and he knows how to put his guys in the right situations. Matthew Stafford will be challenged in LA, I think. I'm not saying for the starting job. I'm saying from a coaching perspective, and that's what you would get in New England. So I don't want to hear it, Teddy Bruschi and all your other Patriot guys out there. Don't talk like that about other guys, especially a guy that has proven year in and year out that he can survive in the NFL, that he can do things. He's got an arm. He can be coached. Okay? So I don't want to hear it. That's all. That kind of hurt when I heard that comment. And I got texts from people, and they're like, "Oh, well, the Lions hater, this and that." No, they don't understand. They just don't understand, and you just can't question Matthew Stafford's toughness ever. Just don't. All right, so moving on, one of Stafford's old teammates, Calvin Johnson. He is officially a Hall of Famer in Canton, and there was really no doubt in my mind that he would make it. Sometimes I just felt, maybe he didn't play long enough, to be considered like a first ballot. I mean, I knew he was definitely going to get in. It just was a matter of, was he going to be first ballot or not? And he actually becomes the 7th wide receiver in the modern era to be elected on the first ballot. I mean, that's incredible. He joined like Steve Largent, Jerry Rice. I can't remember the others. I know those two are right off the top of my head. Randy Moss. That's the other one. But he definitely deserves it. I mean, we all know how dominant Calvin was. I mean, triple coverage against the Cowboys in 2011. Snags down the touchdown. And he helped his team come back, by the way. 2013 against the Bengals. Triple coverage again. Just mossed everybody. There's a Randy Moss reference. But Megatron deserves it. And I thought it was funny that when David Baker knocked on his door, David Baker, the president of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the infamous knocking on the door to welcome you to Canton, Calvin didn't know who it was. Because they usually do it in like hotel rooms, I think. But this year, they went to everybody's house individually. And I just thought it was funny that, I guess he was about to go get his gun or something like that because he had no idea who was at the door. But it was a big 6'9" David Baker. Yeah, he's a big guy. He's a really big guy. If you get a picture next to him or something, he's really big. I believe he's like 6'8", 6'9", something like that. I think he's definitely bigger than Calvin. And he was shocked. He didn't know who was at the door. But he deserves it. And that brings up the question, when is this whole relationship with Calvin going to be mended? Because if everybody remembers 2016, January 2016, when he played his final game with the Lions, apparently how the story goes is that he went into Rod Wood's office and Jim Caldwell and all them over there in Allen Park and said, "I'm done. I'm hanging it up." And Rod Wood basically said, where's your bonus? Do you deserve your bonus? It was all about money, like something with bonus money. Did you deserve your bonus? Look, I'm under the impression I support the organization because that bonus money was not in his contract to be given to, if he retired and all that. But at the same time, Rod Wood should not have spoken to Calvin Johnson like that. And Calvin's been really, upset at the organization ever since. It all has to do with money. This bonus thing and how he was treated by Rod Wood. Rod Wood never should have said that. Put the ego aside, Rod. I know Rod's been talking a lot during, press conferences and holding court, if you will, as Mike Valeni would say. But it's time. It's time to get Calvin Johnson back in the building. It's time. I know Barry was, out for a while with the Lions. Now he's back. It's time. It's time to get Calvin back. It's time for him to be on the field, mentoring those wide receivers, being in the alumni organization. I know I've interviewed ex-players, Corey Schlesinger, Lomas Brown. Those guys are really involved in the Lions alumni organization. Jim Arnold, the former punter, they really, really enjoy it. It's a great fraternity of brothers and ex-players that it's like a brotherhood. And we need Calvin back in that circle. He's just going to be a great addition to that. And it seems like things are going in the right direction, though, because if anybody heard Calvin Johnson's media appearance on a Zoom call, apparently he has spoken with Sheila. And it seems like she's taking control of this and really wants to mend everything with Calvin. And he admitted it. And it's funny because about a month or two ago when he was interviewing with Dave Burkett about something from the Free Press, he had said, nobody's talked to me or anything. Rod Wood hasn't talked or anything. But now apparently it seems like Sheila is trying to make amends. And this is really good because I'm under the impression, and I was always under this, time heals wounds. That's the old phrase, right? I always thought when Calvin gets into the Hall of Fame officially, when he's announced or, when August comes, when the ceremony happens, I think that's when he's going to get on the right terms with the Lions. I think that's when, the fences will be mended, if you will. And it seems like we're on the right track. I'm really hoping the goal is by August that everything is settled. Calvin's back in the facility. Calvin's back signing autographs for fans at training camp and helping the wide receivers. Hopefully by August, when he has that bronze bust in Canton, hopefully, cross our fingers, that he'll be back. And he needs to be back. He needs to. It's just really crazy, though, because now, Calvin is one of the best players, obviously, in Lions history. Then you had Barry, who probably is the best. And then there's Matthew Stafford, who's definitely up in the top 5 at least. And a lot of them just wanted out. Obviously Calvin ended with the money problems. Barry left training camp early. It seemed like the Lions just kind of, sucked some life out of him at the end. And then, Matthew Stafford wants out. He requested a trade. So it's kind of crazy that arguably the 3 best Lions in the team's history, they just wanted out. And they were done. And they had it out against the organization with something. If you're the Lions, I think you got to do some searching right now. And really, that's going to start with Sheila and Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes and Chris Spielman. These are the guys who are going to be the leaders of the organization from now on for the next 5 years, hopefully. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how things work out with Calvin. And to be honest, if he's back, the Lions are better off as an organization. Just wipe the slate clean. And Rod Wood, apologize. Rod needs to apologize. Was it handled bad? Of course it was. It was not handled right. Did Calvin deserve his money? That's a question for another day, but it just, for a guy that gave his entire body literally for the organization, now, he's coming out and saying of how much, pain pills he was on and, how beat up his body was and everything. He played the game physical. That's just how he played. And he literally sacrificed his body for the organization. And if you just want to brush him off like that, you deserve your bonus, put the ego aside, Rod. Admit that you messed up, and let's get Calvin back. Let's get Calvin back. He deserves to come back. The fans love him. Everybody here in Detroit loves Calvin Johnson. People still wear those 81 jerseys. I'm excited. And I can't wait for August to see Calvin go in. Who knows? Maybe I'll be there. I'd love to go. Canton's only an hour from Cleveland. I've been to the Hall of Fame before. I love it. I love seeing all the bronze busts. Definitely got to get a picture with Calvin's bust one day. I got to get a Calvin jersey as well. I just have that Stafford Lions jersey. That'd be nice. I almost got his autograph at training camp one year, but unfortunately, he didn't see. I was a little kid at the time. He unfortunately just didn't see me over the taller adults there and skipped over me. Dang, I wish I had that autograph now. Of course, the first ballot Hall of Famer. But congratulations to Calvin Johnson. Very humble, player. I really, really just loved everything about him. And in high school, when I played for a year, I actually wore 81 because of him. I said, I got to wear 81. That's a sweet number because that's Calvin's number. And that was always my thing. And when I played backyard football, I always emulated my game after Calvin. Just going up there, just pretty much mossing everybody and just being that dominant presence with triple coverage. It doesn't matter. Calvin, it's 4'3", 4'4", 40, speed, 6'5", 230, 240. A guy that big shouldn't be able to run that fast, and he did. Calvin changed the way receivers are, I think. You're starting to see more and more of those taller, bigger guys that can run. Kind of like DK Metcalf a little bit. Starting to see that more often now, but Calvin changed the game, in my opinion, with wide receivers. So that's my little Calvin thing. Congratulations again to Megatron. I want to end the program today by talking about a little Pistons talk. And I know I don't talk about the Pistons a lot because, to be quite honest, I don't watch the Pistons a ton. I mean, what is there to watch? This team is 5-18, right? And we talked about it earlier in other programs when the draft happened. Yet I was happy. I was happy that at least they acknowledged that they're in a rebuild because they are in a rebuild. And I can't stand the Piston diehards out there that for years they thought, oh no, we're just one piece away. We're just a couple pieces away from being a contender. No, enough. I just can't that's why I just could not stand it. Stop thinking that you were a couple pieces away. It's not true. And they completely regarded the roster. And of course, I mean, they are this bad. I mean, 5-18. I will say this though. Jeremy Grant, averaging 24 points a game, he seems to be like a guy that you could really maybe build around for the future. I mean, I'd definitely keep him for sure. I mean, he's been playing well. Bad Knees Blake, as I like to call him, he's been a no-show this year. He's aged. Man, don't even get me started about that. And then there's Josh Jackson, who some people think, could be up for most improved. Same with Jeremy Grant. I think more him on that side with the most improved award. But there are spurts where Josh Jackson can play. And you remember Josh Jackson, he was an 18-year-old when he got drafted, or 19-year-old when he got drafted. Remember that whole thing? He went to Kansas, then he left the state of Michigan. He played at Consortium in Detroit. That school is now closed. And he went out west. I can't remember the school that he played at. Some school out west where Prolific Prep, I believe. And so he was out there for a couple years, and then he got drafted after Kansas, after he played at Kansas. And he seemed like he was sort of a bust, kind of just weeded out a little bit. And, I always cheer for the guy because I remember him from the high school days, playing against Cassius and AAU and all that. And I remember hearing all about him when I was in high school, early part of my high school career. And, I always cheer for the guy. He's a native Detroiter. I really hope that he does well with the Pistons. And there are spurts where you see, Josh Jackson playing well. So there are a little bit of pieces on this team that I can see. But, they need a lot of work. They do. Looks like the rebuild kind of sped up a little bit more as they traded Derrick Rose finally to the New York Knicks just a couple days ago. Dennis Smith Jr. Is who the Pistons get, and a 2021 second-round pick. By the way, speaking of second round, the NBA is not like the NFL where, you really value those lower round picks a lot because a lot of those guys can be really key contributors and help with depth and all that. But I don't know. The NBA, I mean, barely any second rounders make it anyways. So whatever. But I mean, Troy Weaver, I trust him. I feel like he knows what he's doing in the long run. So we'll see. But I wanted Derrick Rose gone. Oh my gosh. I was so upset when the Pistons got Derrick Rose even because I'm like, well, what's the point? I mean, what is he, the missing piece? Are we going to get a couple really nice performances and that's going to carry the Pistons to the playoffs? No. Derrick Rose is washed up. He's old. I mean, there are some nights where he shows off his MVP-like performances from the past, but, I mean, you're not getting on a nightly basis anymore because, of all the injuries that he's had. It's a really sad story, but it is what it is. So I'm happy Derrick Rose is gone because I wanted Troy Weaver and company to get rid of him during the offseason because I wanted to see what we could maybe get for him. But, I mean, he does, he's a nice player off the bench maybe could start a couple games here and there, give you a little bit of scoring now and then. So he's going back with Tom Thibodeau, his old coach in Chicago, who's the head coach for the Knicks now. So good luck to Derrick Rose, but just more guys. I just need more guys out of here. The next guy that I think the Pistons should get rid of is Blake Griffin. It's time. Okay, everybody, Stan and Ed Stefanski and all them, they thought Blake Griffin maybe was the piece that they were missing. And I think they needed to sell little tickets that first year at Little Caesars Arena as well. So we'll see what happens. I'm really, really hoping that Blake Griffin is traded. And I know the Pistons have showed a little bit of fight. They took the Lakers to double overtime last week, and then they beat them 107-92 in another game. I mean, okay. Like, who does anybody care? I mean, I didn't really care when I saw that. I'm like, okay, well, they beat the Lakers, and they took them to double overtime. I mean, it was just like one of those things where it was like kind of like a corner story. If you look at the newspaper, you see the main headline of whatever the main story is, and then there's like a little tiny article about something in the corner that's in really small letters, and it's a very short story. That's what that is to me. To me, all this Pistons stuff right now is just a corner story. There's bigger news in Detroit with the Lions and all that because people care about the Lions. People care about the Lions here, and I mean, there's even some things with the Tigers that may even be bigger news than Pistons stuff. I don't know. That's just me. I just think there's a lot of people that don't care about the Pistons. I don't even know if the casual fan even knows that they beat the Lakers that one game. Just ever since Bill Davidson sold this team, or his family sold it because I think he passed away, to Tom Gores, it just has not been the same. I don't think people have cared as much as they used to. Gone are the days of the bad boys. Gone are the days of going to work Pistons. Hopefully this new era, works out with Troy Weaver, because I want the Pistons to do well. I do. But they just have not kept me interested the last 10 years. At least they're back downtown. Happy about that. I don't know. There's something about the Pistons, though. I just wish more people cared, but I don't care. That's the thing. It's like I don't care, but at the same time, I just wish they gave us a product that people could care about, if you know what I mean. Just my little Piston spiel. Got to talk about something other than the Lions right now because football is slowing down a little bit. So that'll wrap things up here on Open Mic Night. Thanks again for tuning in. Check out all the other content that we have. We have the Wrestling Podcast, Doc and Jock, Fan Report, Michigan Podcast. They're all really, really great podcasts. I really liked the Michigan Podcast last week. Steve Dace, the host, he interviewed Jay Flannelly, who actually is a good friend of Tom Brady's from back in the day at the University of Michigan when he played there. That's a really interesting one. Go back and listen to that. It's really, really good. Oh, and one more side note. I am trying to get some really, really good guests on. I'm just trying. I haven't heard anything back yet, but I have been reaching out. I know it's been a while since we've had a guest. I believe Luther Bradley was our last guest, but I am trying. Don't worry. I am definitely reaching out to people. I just waiting for a response, basically. Just trying to nudge people in the right direction to get people on, to help me out. So hopefully we'll be getting a guest on. Hopefully next week. Really, really crossing our fingers on this one. They're going to be. I got a couple guests for you that I think are going to be really, really good, and they all of them pertain to the Lions. So really, really hoping that it'll work out. But thanks again, folks, for tuning in as always to Open Mic Night.